You are listening to The Hero's Journey. I'm Dan Zarzana.
And I'm Jeff Garvin.
Post potestia nachniotsa. Now, I think I just said, let the journey begin, but if my pronunciation was off and I authorized the missile launch, disregard this message. I'm going to be in the bunker. Welcome to another episode of The Hero's Journey, where Jeff and I apply the teachings of mythologist Joseph Campbell and film executive, I think film executive, he's got a lot of titles when you look him up on the internet, screenwriter, development, Christopher Vogler, to contemporary novels and films.
If you have listened to our most recent two episodes, The Time Machine and Outbreak, you know that we do our analyses separately, and then we reveal our opinions to each other live on the show.
And we hope this leads to interesting discussion. I have a prediction, however. Not only are we going to fight as much this episode as we did during those previous two episodes, but this may be the one that breaks us.
Oh, no. Well, my commitment is to listen better and let my mind be swayed instead of like digging my feet in. So I hope you're not wrong. In this episode,
you almost made me spit coffee again.
No, that
would be two in a row.
Two in a row. In this episode, we are looking at director John McTiernan's 1990 film adaptation of Tom Clancy's 1984 debut novel, The Hunt for Red October.
I would like to thank the listeners who voted in the poll for this episode. Due to your valiant efforts, we must all now endure a third episode of Jeff doing Sean Connery impressions.
I can't wait.
I hope you're happy with yourselves.
I cannot wait.
I'm actually looking forward to it.
You're the man now, dog.
That's one. Yeah, there you go.
The Hunt for Red October was produced on a budget of $30 million and grossed more than $200 million worldwide. That is not a bad return on investment.
Yeah.
It was nominated for 3 Academy Awards with George Waters 2, George Waters the sequel, and Cecilia Hall taking home the trophy for Best Sound Effects Editing. Well deserved, too. Because,
I think so.
You know, you're not just cutting between phone and man on the street, but 2 different submarines that you kind of have to, and multiple different kinds of communication devices on the submarines.
Yeah.
Crazy.
There's a lot of audio chaos happening in this movie.
Yeah, for sure.
And for a film that takes place predominantly aboard 2 submarines, this film stars, I counted up to 500,000 recognizable faces.
It's a lot.
I'm not going to list them all here because we'd run out of tape. So
right.
I think we'll just, as we mention characters, we'll identify the actor.
It's probably worth pointing out that the novel was written during the Cold War when the tensions between former Soviet Union and NATO were high. And during this period, Hollywood was churning out a bunch of Cold War films, like highlighting this conflict.
Right. The Russians were the boogeyman when we were growing up. Movies like Red Dawn, Ruskies, Rocky IV, Top Gun, War Games. Some of the James Bond films involve some maniac trying to start a shooting war between the Soviet Union and NATO. And it's played for comedy in Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home, when the Enterprise travels back to 1986 and Chekhov is running around San Francisco asking, "Where do you keep your nuclear vessels?"
Yes, I remember that. The Cold War was a ripe subject, and this film was released just 5 months after the fall of the Berlin Wall. I wonder what McTiernan thought of that. He was making like a frightening, topical Cold War film, and then boom, it's a period piece. It's like,
yeah. Unfortunately, it's applicable again today, maybe, because NATO and Russia are at odds once again with President Putin on the throne. I'm not saying there's anything to this, but the name of the Red October's political officer was Putin, and that dude gets straight up murdered in the first 15 minutes.
So you think this is personal for him?
I'm not saying. I'm just saying. All right, are we ready to Svetlana Boginskaya?
Da, comrade partner Daniel.
Do you remember Svetlana Boginskaya?
Nope, I have no idea what that reference is.
When we were in high school, there was an Olympic Games that I don't remember where it took place, but I remember there was a Russian gymnast named Svetlana Boginskaya. Anyway, secure the hatches, flood the ballast tanks, and man your stations. We're on the hunt for Red October.
Oh, dear God, comrade, here we go. The dread and the fatigue of the last 2 episodes is heavy on my heart as we begin this. Act 1, The Ordinary World. World of Common Day. We see our character.
World of Common Day, aye.
We see our main character in his status quo normal life.
Status quo, aye.
Good. Dan, here we are just at the very beginning of the first stage of the journey. And already my analysis begins to tremble because there is so much information the audience needs to understand the action in this movie. So many crucial events have already been set in motion before we see the first frame of film.
Right.
And then there's all this scene setting and exposition that it contributes to different parts of the journey, right? And especially in the first act. I see 3 main plots / interweaving journeys that don't truly intersect until the third act. So we've got, we got Jack Ryan on his mission to help Ramius defect. We've got Captain Mancuso, Sonar Tech Jonesy, and the crew of the USS Dallas on their hunt for the Red October.
We have a title.
And then I think the third main plot is Captain Marco Ramius and the officers of the Russian attack submarine Red October trying to get to the U.S. to defect. So as we proceed, because the plot is so complex, and the plot of the novel is exponentially more complicated.
Oh, for real.
So I'm going to try to touch on the clearest, most illustrative examples of each stage of the journey. Wherever possible, my commitment is to avoid plot listing and assume that you, the listener, have seen this movie or read the book or at least understand the large arc of the story, because I can't possibly touch every significant turning point.
That's a good warning for every episode of this show. We expect that you have read the book or watched the movie already, because this is Spoiler Horn, the podcast. We don't... And
start
also to finish, we talk about the whole thing.
We try to make, other than our little comments about current events here and there, we try to make the episodes evergreen. So if you decide 3 months down the line to go on a submarine movie kick, skip this episode now and watch it. You'll get a lot more out of it, I think, especially this episode. So anyway, I'm going to try to stick to Jack Ryan's journey because that's the central journey. But it's going to be necessary for me to jump a little bit into Ramius and Dallas's journeys. Okay. Jack Ryan is a CIA analyst / author of nonfiction military books, living in London with his wife Caroline, a ship's doctor on the USS Enterprise, and his daughter Sally.
I just got that. I was like, wait, ship's doctor. Okay, Gates McFadden.
Yeah.
Yep.
And his daughter Sally, who wants a brother for her teddy bear. Jack is not a field agent. He works at a desk analyzing data and writing books. He does not like to fly because of turbulence, and he never, ever, ever falls asleep on a plane.
Right.
Dan, you have the con.
There was a moment, I just want to add. The novel has a line where Ramius, and this establishes Ramius's World of Common Day, and part of his reason for wanting to defect. Page 4. It had struck him as a typical Soviet city, full of ramshackle buildings, dirty streets, and ill-clad citizens. As it was in most Russian cities, winter was Gorky's best season. The snow hid all the dirt.
Yeah.
Wow. Not a very favorable opinion. I can picture the travel brochure there.
What struck me about this novel is how much military detail there is.
Oh, gosh. Yeah.
How much backstory he gives on every single character, no matter how few pages that character occupies.
Yes.
It's like he had been on submarines and been in Gorky Park. It's just his prose is great, and it puts you in this exotic. He's amazing.
Moving on to Call to Adventure, where the hero is presented with a challenge which renders him unable to continue living in the comfort of the ordinary world.
I just want to say I'm so glad you got stuck with this portion of the journey. So glad.
I spent so long trying to decide really what the calls to adventure are for each of these parties. And I'm still not sure I've got it right. But what I landed on, Jack Ryan flies to the United States to meet with Vice Admiral James Greer, who in the film is played by James Earl Jones.
Jack, boy, get yourself in here. Jesus, you look like hell.
Thank you very much, Admiral.
Ryan shows Greer photographs of a new Russian submarine, and this boat, as they call it, has some mysterious doors on the hull. And Ryan can't identify them. British intelligence doesn't know what they are. And so this becomes the mission, figure out what the heck this thing is. Greer then gives Ryan permission to show these photographs to a contact named Skip Tyler, played by Jeffrey Jones, who is a former naval officer whose career was cut short by an accident involving a drunk driver, now an instructor at the Naval Academy. Ramius, as far as his call to adventure, I think the Red October is put to sea, and Ramius must now meet with the Zampolit, or political officer, on the Red October to open their orders. And it is during this scene that Ramius murders the political officer. There's no going back. Ramius burns the orders that instruct the Red October to go to a certain grid square on the map, meet up with a Russian attack sub called the Konovalov, which is skippered by Viktor Tupolev, who was a former student of Ramius, and he replaces the orders with a document that he pulls out of his jacket. On the Dallas, the USS attack boat Dallas, Jonesy picks up an unusual sonar signature, and this begins the Dallas's hunt for Red October.
That takes us to refusal of the call. Confronted with fear of the unknown, our hero refuses to engage in the adventure, and sometimes the refusal comes from within the hero, and sometimes from without. Okay, so bear with me here, because I'm skipping a lot of stuff, and I'm gonna kind of contradict your call.
Oh, all right.
Like we've both said, this is a tough movie, and I think you identified for certain the inciting incident, which is kind of like the call, but kind of different in a film. I think the clearest, most poignant call to adventure in this movie happens, fast forward with me, 35 minutes in. Admiral Greer taps Jack to brief the National Security Advisor and the Joint Chiefs about the Red October. And this is the scene where, Jack dumps a bunch of expo, some of which we already know, but it's so complicated that they have to do a slideshow, like making sure the audience gets this. And the Joint Chiefs are asking questions. It's really a great scene because it's fraught with conflict and it clarifies stuff for the audience. This is good expo screenwriting. This is not two characters telling each other what they already know. This is a high-stakes scene for Jack, and we want him to succeed, and this shows us the attitude of the military. So I really this. To me is the gold standard of how to dump expo in a military film. After the briefing, this is where I ring the bell. National Security Advisor Jeffrey Pelt asks Ryan to stay after class. and this is where the adventure is called. This is what really sets him onto his hero's journey. Pelt says to Ryan, "Okay, so you've got all this analysis. What do you think we should do?" And Ryan says,
"Well, first we would need to contact the commanders in the Atlantic directly. The Russians get one whiff of this through the regular communication circuits, the game is up. Second, we need to figure out what can we do to help them. We need to devise a plan to intercede, ready to go at a moment's notice. And third, somebody's got to go out there and make contact with Ramius and find out what his intentions really are."
And Pelt says,
"Okay, when do you leave?"
This is Ryan's invitation to step out of his comfort zone as an analyst and join the military leaders who are going to make decisions based on his judgment. And Ryan immediately goes into the classic refusal.
"The general was right. I am not field personnel. I am only an analyst."
But Pelt persuades him there's no one else to do the job. And as in all good thrillers, there has to be a ticking clock. There has to be a deadline. Pelt delivers this too. He gives Ryan 3 days to accomplish the mission. That's what I've got as Jack Ryan's call to. And it was like, oh my God, 35 minutes in. But really...
Right. But it's because you've got 10 minutes on the Red October and you've got 10 minutes on the Dallas. And really, this is only 10 minutes into Jack Ryan's story. So
the clearest indication I have is that Jack, in that first 30 minutes, Jack is being an analyst and he's doing his ordinary job. That's what he's doing. He's showing people pictures and
Very
analyzing
good.
the data. But this is the moment where he crosses into, being an agent.
I saw a refusal moment after Ramius kills the political officer. He makes it look like an accident, dumps some tea on the floor.
Yes.
Dr. Petrov, played by Tim Curry, says, "We cannot carry on without a political officer. We have to return to base."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Ramius says, "We do not cancel operations because of accidents." And then Petrov responds, "Well, I think we should at least report this to Fleet Command." And Borodin says, "Impossible, Doctor. Our orders are for strict radio silence." Petrov, I think, is the representation of refusal, at least in terms of the crew of the Red October.
Nailed it.
Another thing that really turned my brain to mush doing this analysis is so much of the Red Octobers, particularly Ramius and his officers' story, is a lie. So
Right.
A lot of what we're seeing fits the points of the journey, but it's all a charade. And so
Yeah.
I kept thinking, but that's not really what's happening.
Yeah.
All right. Supernatural aid, or meeting with the mentor, where the hero receives counsel on how to operate in the special world. There are a couple of moments. One of them takes place before what you've identified as Jack Ryan's call to adventure. This is
Yep.
where
Totally agree.
Greer and Ryan are walking down a subterranean corridor. Ryan's not paying attention to anything. He's just reading this document.
Right.
Greer tells him that they're heading to a briefing. Ryan asks who's giving the briefing, and Greer says, "You are." And Ryan just about messes his diapers. But Greer counsels him. He says,
No one understands this material better than you. Just give him a rundown on the sub and appraise you the stuff in your hand. He's liable to ask some direct questions. Give him direct answers. Tell him what you think.
I thought another moment was with Skip Tyler, when Ryan is showing him the photographs of the Red October, and Skip Tyler poses a theory that he thinks maybe these doors are for a silent propulsion drive that the U.S. Navy tried to develop a few years ago, but they couldn't get it to work. And Tyler sets the stage here.
When I was 12, I helped my daddy build a bomb shelter in our basement because some fool parked a dozen warheads 90 miles off the coast of Florida. This thing could park a couple of hundred warheads off Washington or New York, and no one would know anything about it till it was all over.
That was one of the first moments where I really bumped on the difference between novel and film. Because they get right to, this guy knows what the Caterpillar drive is, and now they've identified what it probably is and that it's a silent propulsion system. Takes the guys a longer time to figure it out in the book. It's more of a mystery. And I thought it was a very good change. It sped things up. It didn't spoil the surprise. It was like, oh boy, now it's silent. And the sabotage and the stuff that happens later on the Red October would have been so much more confusing had that not been a snap direct delivery of information. We need to know that for the rest of that complicated stuff to make sense.
And I forgot to mention about Skip Tyler, and this is not in the novel, this is only in the film. Skip Tyler is working on a DSRV, deep submersible rescue vehicle. He says it's got a docking collar that can connect to any other nation's submarine, and they can get it anywhere in the world in 24 hours. This is sort of like, the special weapon that is given to the hero that helps them achieve their goal.
Dan, that leads us to crossing the threshold. The hero must pass a special barrier to enter the special world. This crossing represents the hero's commitment to taking the adventure. Jack, who hates flying, gets on a military plane. Now, I'm not a military guy, but this looked like a cargo plane or something. He's in like a jump seat, you know, and he's just jumping up and down and the rattling. And the co-pilot is like yelling at him because it's so noisy. I'm telling him stories of horrible flights where everybody threw up, and then like puts the candy bar he's eating in and say, "You want a bite?" It's just like worst possible scenario. I almost put this as the ordeal. Poor Jack. He even says, "Jack, next time you get a bright idea, just put it in a memo," which is refusal. And that recurs in the movie. So one final note for Jack's crossing of the threshold. He is now wearing the uniform of a Navy officer, further symbolizing his commitment to getting out from behind the desk and getting into the action. He's not a Navy officer. This is a fake thing, but he's taken on the costume of the warrior now. He's put on the war paint.
Good.
And then I have one for Red October. Ramius delivers this moving speech to his crew outlining their fake orders. You know, he's getting them on board with the new mission.
Yeah.
And in the wardroom, he reveals to the officers that before they left, he sent a letter to the admiral of the fleet revealing his intention to steal the sub and defect. They are committed. There's no going back now. Okay, finally, on the Dallas, Jonesy persuades Captain Mancuso, played brilliantly by Scott Glenn,
Absolutely.
that he's found a new kind of Russian sub and that he can track it. And Mancuso decides to change course to intercept it. So now Mancuso, Jonesy, and the Dallas are officially on the hunt. Dan, that brings us to the end of Act 1 with less...
End of Act 1,
Less... All right. We're going to take a break, move to the Campbell Cafe, get a refill on coffee.
Oh, thank God.
And share some side quests. Dan, tell me about your side quests.
I got on a little Jack Ryan kick because we were watching the movie and reading the book, and a few years ago when the Amazon Prime series Jack Ryan was released, I watched season 1, enjoyed it very much, and then totally forgot about season 2. So this time I watched season 2 of the show, and it is such a well-made, well-produced, well-acted, just everything about that show is spot on.
I also watched the first 5 eps of the series, and I'm hooked.
And you're in season 1, yeah?
Yeah.
I also continued my James Bond viewing, so I'm plugging away on that. What were your side quests?
I read The Artist's Journey by Stephen Pressfield. It's a follow-up to The War of Art, looking at the artist's life through the hero's journey. And I definitely enjoyed it. His books are always inspiring, super short chapters, but I didn't think he really unpacked the hero's journey in a point-for-point way. So the premise was thin. The content was good, but I didn't feel like the content really fulfilled the promise of the title.
So we're not going to be incorporating his book like we did Christopher Vogler's book into this show.
I don't think so. No, it's a more personal book than that. I watched several films, but the ones I would highlight were I watched Minari, which is the Oscar-nominated film by Lee Isaac Chung. It was filmed and it's in Korean, but the director and the production were all based in America. It's about a Korean family who starts a farm in Arkansas in the 1980s, and it's semi-autobiographical from the director-writer, and it's a very indie film in terms that it has a not terribly satisfying ending. It's a peek into a life, and it's emotional and gripping and moving. But you don't walk away going, wow, bang, pow. It's more of a makes you think, makes you feel movie. But I enjoyed it very much. It was very well made. And then I rounded out my viewing with yet another Sean Connery movie. On St. Patrick's Day, we watched the 1959 musical comedy Darby O'Gill and the Little People. And I will say, Sean Connery doing an Irish accent and singing is worth the 90-minute experience. It's a ridiculous movie, heartwarming, and fun. I recommend it to watch with your kids on St. Patrick's Day.
This is pre-James Bond Sean Connery.
That's right.
Does he do an Irish accent?
I mean, it's like they clearly tried to make him because he wasn't Sean Connery yet. It's
And he sings.
He sings, and he's got a great voice. And it's not underneath a mango tree. He's got a great voice. Does a good job.
Does that conclude side quests? Act 2 of the hero's journey begins with the Road of Trials.
Road of Trials,
tests allies and enemies.
Enemies, aye.
Having crossed... I deserve this. Having crossed the first threshold, the hero meets allies, makes enemies, and must pass a series of tests to prove their worthiness. Jack Ryan has a lot of allies. Dr. Jeffrey Pelt, who has a bigger role in the film than the novel. There's a lot of scenes with the president where Ryan and ambassadors meet directly with the president of the United States, and he's the one who sends Ryan on his mission. But in the film, it's Dr. Jeffrey Pelt, who's the National Security Advisor. He's played by Richard Jordan, and I think he's fantastic. He puts on this Southern accent that reminded me a lot of House of Cards, where Francis Underwood had a North Carolina accent, and I thought Pelt sounded similar. You were going to say something?
I was going to say, I wonder if they eliminated the president from the movie because they thought having a fictional president would further remove the audience from the reality of the circumstances. Because if it wasn't Reagan, but Pelt is a great stand-in for the other government forces that come to bear. He really stands for all this other stuff that happens in the book. Anyway.
Agreed. Vice Admiral James Greer, CIA Deputy Director for Intelligence. This is James Earl Jones' character. Skip Tyler, he's got a much smaller role in the film than he does in the novel. Commander Bart Mancuso of the Los Angeles-class submarine USS Dallas. This is our Scott Glenn. The rest of the crew of the Dallas, with sonar technician first class Ronald Jones, lovingly known as Jonesy. In the novel, Ryan spends a lot of time with British naval forces. Mm-hmm. He is friends with Vice Admiral John White, who's the captain of the HMS Invincible, which is a small British aircraft carrier. There's a couple of British pilots that Ryan interacts with. There's a lot of that in the novel that is completely eliminated in the film. And I think in terms of the film, it tightens the story. It streamlines Jack's journey. In the novel, it works because you get the sense of the enormity of this situation where the entire Russian Atlantic fleet is on the water and the US and the British have to respond.
Yeah.
Okay, enemies. The Cold War era Soviet Navy for Ryan and the NATO elements in the film and the novel. In some ways, Ramius is an enemy, at least in terms of Ryan's side of things. He thinks Ramius intends to defect to the United States, but there is no evidence of that. It's just a hunch. Well, he's an analyst, so based on the information that he has analyzed, this is his theory. As far as every other American in the show goes, Ramius and the Red October are the enemy. And we have to remember this, particularly within the context of the time period that this story took place. This was the Cold War. These were opposing forces. Any other allies and enemies that you'd like to... the Captain Tupolev of the Konovalov, who appears a couple of times in the film, but in very important parts. He's in it more in the novel.
I would say another important enemy is the cook's assistant, Saboteur, who is a loyal Russian party member and is there to prevent... He's a backup for the Communist Party, so that if this sub were to fall into the wrong hands, he would destroy it.
Right.
I listed Ramius, Borodin, and the officers as shapeshifters. And now, good luck with the tests, Dan. Have fun. I'm going to sit back.
Well, I'm just going to say, a bunch of stuff happens.
Yeah.
And that brings us to approach to the inmost cave. Because I had the call to adventure so much earlier than you, a lot of the stuff that I've got as tests we've already discussed. So
me too.
I'm zipping through here to catch up.
Okay.
You know, there's the scene of Jonesy. He has analyzed the audio signature of the Red October, and he approaches Captain Mancuso. I think you've already discussed this. I think this was part of your crossing the threshold. But he plays the audio for Mancuso.
I'm not following you, Jonesy.
Sir, I'm sorry. Listen to it at 10 times speed. Now that's gotta be man-made, Captain.
That's a test for Jonesy because he's having to convince his captain
Yeah.
to change plans and go track this weird audio signature.
Yes.
And it's a success because Captain Mancuso buys the story and they replot their course.
Yeah.
In the novel, Jonesy also earns a promotion because of this work. There's a test for Ramius and the Red October as they are passing through Thor's Twins, which is an underwater rock formation.
Red Route 1. Red Route 1.
Leads into Red Route 1, a long, winding underwater canyon. And Ramius tests his crew by increasing the speed. The navigator's already plotted the course based on speed and a stopwatch. He even says, the navigator later to another crewman, he says, "You give me a map and a stopwatch and I could fly a plane without windows."
Yeah. It's a great line.
But Ramius throws this guy for a loop when he increases the speed. So now they've got to recalculate. So I think this is a success for Red October and the crew, particularly the navigator, who has successfully guided this gigantic submarine through this narrow canyon underwater. But something goes wrong with the cryogenic plant, and they have to shut down the Caterpillar drive. Ramius insists, however, that they continue forward using standard propellers. And what this does is it allows Jonesy on the Dallas to reacquire the Red October. Dr. Pelt confronts the Russian ambassador.
You have nearly 100 naval vessels operating in the North Atlantic right now. Your aircraft has dropped enough sonar buoys so that a man could walk from Greenland to Iceland to Scotland without getting his feet wet. Prudence demands that we deploy our ships to observe yours. It would be well for your government to consider that, having your ships and ours, your aircraft and ours, in such proximity is inherently dangerous. Wars have begun that way, Mr. Ambassador.
And the Russian ambassador lies and says it's a rescue mission because we've lost one of our subs. And Pelt calls his bluff and says, "How can we help?" I think this was a great scene.
Yeah.
I thought this was a test for Pelt. That he's trying to prevent a shooting war by talking.
Right.
One more thing. A Russian anti-submarine aircraft has located the Red October and has dropped a torpedo. Ramius proves his tactical ability by guiding the Red October through the canyon the rest of the way, almost by feel. There's this great scene where the navigator is counting.
Yeah, it's so good.
They have to make a turn through this canyon or they're going to collide with the wall. And Ramius is waiting and waiting and waiting because he's going to outsmart the torpedo.
Yeah.
But the crew is panicked. But Ramius keeps his cool and he defeats the situation. However, the crew is now skeptical because as far as the crew knows, they're conducting drills. This is a hide-and-seek exercise.
Yeah, oh, good point.
But now suddenly,
Good
a live
point.
torpedo just detonated into the wall next to them. Why are they actually shooting at us? Now, Borden tries to defuse the situation by saying if they were really shooting at us, we'd be dead by now. But there's this pan across the crew, and they're all looking at Ramius, and now a seed of doubt has been planted.
Yeah. There's a great performance moment by Sean Connery where Borodin and the navigator are like, come on. And Sean Connery is just calmly sort of counting on his fingers, whispering to himself, waiting for that perfect moment to turn. I thought that was a great performance.
All right. The last test for Ryan was aboard the USS Enterprise, the aircraft carrier captained by Admiral Painter, played by Fred Thompson, where he is talking to Painter and Captain Davenport, played by Daniel Davis, trying to convince them of his position on Ramius and his actions. And Davenport is hostile to Ryan, saying it may seem that simple in a cubicle at CIA. Like, really condescending.
Yeah.
This is a scene where Admiral Painter puts the seed in Ryan's head about how are you going to get the crew. The discussion is there's no way that Ramius and all of his officers and all of his crew are planning to defect to the United States.
Yeah.
They don't buy that. And so if it's just Ramius and maybe some of his officers, how do you get the crew to get off the ship? This gets Ryan thinking about that.
Okay. Wow. As predicted, we're not matching up. So let's move to Approach to the Inmost Cave, where the hero reaches the edge of a dangerous place where the object of his quest is hidden. I have Ramius pulling off his daring turn as they enter Red Route 1. Red Route 1 is the approach that will lead him to the intersection with the Dallas. This, at the end of this route, this is where the inevitable crisis will take place. So I have the approach beginning with the Caterpillar Drive crisis. They can't run silent anymore. This is the beginning of bad times because their toys are getting taken away. Just as when you approach the ordeal, your weapons and your allies begin to be stripped away. Pelt's face-off with the Russian ambassador is an escalation toward potential war. And then, because of the Caterpillar Drive fail, the Red October attracts the attention of the anti-subplane and they drop a torpedo. Things are getting worse, right? The American forces are picking up on him. He is no longer stealth. And then back on the Enterprise, Ryan... Alec Baldwin is like bending over in the shower, like holding a pole. I didn't really understand that.
That was an odd
choice. Very awkward. He realizes, oh my God, this is how he's going to get the guys off the submarine. And he doesn't tell us. He just realizes he's shaving. How do you get guys off a nuclear sub? And then he runs up and talks to Painter and tries to convince him, hey, Dallas has found the Red October. You've got to get me on that boat. And Painter says, to make things even worse as we approach this crisis, Painter says the only way they can get him to the Dallas is in a chopper, and they'd have to strip it down to a flying gas can. Now, in a prior scene with Painter, after Jack leaves the room, we learn that Jack is a former Marine who almost died. He was the only survivor in a chopper crash, and he spent 10 months learning how to walk again. So, chopper crash, worst possible scenario for Jack. Yep. This is among his worst fears. So to make things even worse, as Jack is watching, a damaged fighter jet crashes and burns on the deck of the Enterprise, as if to drive home the stakes of his flying. And Painter has a great line.
This business will get out of control. It'll get out of control and we'll be lucky to live through it.
Meanwhile, we get the closest thing we could possibly get to a campfire scene on a submarine. And that is Borodin comes to Ramius's quarters to tell him the Caterpillar Drive's been repaired, they're up and running, and they're coming out of Red Route 1, right? They are completing the approach. And they have this quiet conversation about what they'll do in America. You know, Vasily says he wants to live in Montana and raise rabbits and marry a round American woman who will cook them for him. He has these elaborate, specific fantasies. And I love the idea that pre-internet, this guy has somehow done research on America, even though he's probably under great scrutiny by the Communist Party. And he has these elaborate fantasies of what he's going to do. You love him so much in that moment. You want him to get to Montana. And then Captain says that he has no such appetites, that he misses the peace of fishing. And from Connery's performance in that scene, and from the details from the novel, and he mentions that he widowed his wife the moment he joined the Navy. We know that his wife died. In the book, we find out that part of the reason she died was because of the cheap medicines and the poor medical care that she received as a result of the thrift of the Communist Party and how they treat people. And I get from the book and from this performance that Ramius blames the state and the Navy for his wife's death, and that this is less about freedom in America for him. This is more about vengeance. This is a double FU to the Soviet Union and to the Navy for taking his wife away from him. That is the end of the approach to the inmost cave.
I'm so bummed that I got stuck with the ordeal here.
Isn't it like, it's funny. So if you haven't noticed, listeners, we trade off who gets what segment each episode. And when you sit down to do your analysis and you flip back to your notes and realize who got, ordeal or approach, you always wish you hadn't gotten it, and the other guy gets stuck with the tough part. So, ladies and gentlemen, go Dan.
The ordeal, where the hero faces the ultimate test, often risking death to overcome his worst fear and sometimes actually appearing to die. The incident on the flight deck of the Enterprise results in Ryan boarding that stripped-down gas can of a helicopter. And Captain Davenport sets the stage here, where he says, if you have to ditch, meaning jump out of the helicopter into the water, at this water's temperature, you've got about 4 minutes.
Yikes.
The implication being 4 minutes before you freeze to death.
Yeah.
And again, Ryan clinging to a strap that's on the door of this helicopter. He says that line again. The next time you get an idea, put it in a memo.
Yeah, exactly.
This helicopter is now flying to an open space in the ocean where they hope the Dallas is going to receive a message to surface to collect Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
So this helicopter's hovering. No sign of the Dallas. The pilot tells Ryan, we're going to turn back. And Ryan has to argue, you've got a reserve tank, don't you? And the pilot says, I'm not allowed to invade it except in time of war. And Ryan says, mister, if you don't get me on board that submarine, that'll be exactly what you have. Again, danger's increasing.
Mm-hmm.
Back in Washington, Ambassador Lysenko is telling Dr. Pelt that the initial information he had was incorrect. This is not a rescue mission. A letter was received by Admiral Padoran. So now Pelt is he's receiving some nugget of truth from the ambassador, because he knows that there was a letter, but nobody knows what the contents were. We found this out at the briefing. But Lysenko says, and in this letter, Ramius stated his intention to fire his missiles at the United States.
Game changer.
So now Pelt, he's heard a little bit of truth now from this ambassador. Is he to believe, then, this next piece of information, that Ramius has hostile intentions?
Yeah. Talk about the stakes increasing as we reach the ordeal.
Yes. And I had a lot of this in approach, but it works in ordeal as well. It's just a big, fat ordeal.
So many bullet points of plot, again.
Yeah, and I'm trying to get through them as quickly as possible. Cut back to the helicopter. The Dallas has received the message. And they have to break off their tracking of the Red October to surface and collect Ryan. And Mancuso is not happy about this.
Oh, boy.
And we've got this great sequence of Ryan being lowered on a cable in this stormy weather. Mancuso has told Lieutenant Thompson, who's going to go up into the con tower and try to snag Ryan with this hook.
Yeah.
As he's being lowered down. This helicopter's rotors are generating enough static electricity to light up Chicago. So this is an incredibly dangerous scenario. And there's a storm. And it's a helicopter. This is all Ryan's favorite stuff. The pilot says, this isn't working. We're going to reel him back up. And Ryan disconnects his safety harness and plunges into the freezing water of the Atlantic Ocean. A diver collects him, drags him into the Dallas. And this is where Ryan tells Mancuso, I think Ramius is going to defect. But at this moment, a message is received from the Dallas, given to Mancuso. He reads it, he hands it to Ryan, and the note says, Ramius is going to launch his missiles. Hunter down and sinker. Ryan now desperately pleads his case with Mancuso. Mancuso shuts him down and even postures as if to arrest Ryan. But Ryan throws a Hail Mary.
Has he made any crazy Ivans?
What difference does that make?
Because the next one will be to starboard.
Why, because his last was to port?
No, because he always goes to starboard in the bottom half of the hour.
He's trying to convince Mancuso that he knows Ramius, he understands the man, and that's why his theory that Ramius is going to defect is correct, and you need to listen to me. Red October does do a crazy Ivan to starboard, and this helps to convince Mancuso to help Ryan. You're doing that blinky thing.
I'm just I'm hearing the bullet points, and I'm trying to see how it fits into the. I'm receiving. I'm
okay.
We're very disconnected, like profoundly disconnected at this point. So I'm trying to.
All right, so Mancuso's now on board, and Ryan says, "Give the man a chance." And Mancuso calls for the Dallas to go full on the propellers, which causes cavitation, which, as we know from the novel, cavitation is when the propellers cause vibrations in the water, which is very recognizable by a sonar operator. They have now made their presence known to the Red October. And I had all of this in Ordeal because Red October and Dallas, they load their torpedoes, and there's this posturing. Who's going to fire first? Is anybody going to fire? This is dangerous. This is still a Russian nuclear submarine that the Dallas is facing with torpedoes loaded in her torpedo tubes. And then I ended the ordeal with the Morse code conversation. Where did you draw the line for the ordeal?
To me, the heart of the ideal is Jax getting on that chopper and jumping off of it.
It's a baptism.
And it is, more baptisms. He's faced death again and he survived. So that, to me, that was the end of the ordeal. And then we have reward and road back. So I guess I'll move on to my reward. Having faced his worst fear, the hero seizes the object of his quest. Jack gets onto the Dallas. The boon here is twofold. One, he's finally on Ramius's territory, and he has access to the man who can put him face to face. He is now in possession of what it takes to complete his mission, which is to secure the safety of Ramius's defection. And like you said, he changes Mancuso's mind. He predicts that crazy Ivan and gets Mancuso on board. His gamble pays off. So to me, that's reward.
I forgot to say that in the novel, you talked about the saboteur on the Red October. There's a scene where that is conflated in the film, where there's the confrontation with the saboteur and the sub battle. That's all at the end of the film simultaneously. In the novel, the confrontation with the saboteur takes place a little more than halfway through the novel. And at this point, Ryan is already aboard the Red October. He never sets foot on the Dallas in the novel.
Right.
He's already there. He's in amongst the Russians.
Yeah.
Then there's the saboteur, and he's got to go confront the saboteur. And I felt that in the novel, the reward is after eliminating the saboteur, now he has the trust of Ramius.
Oh boy!
Essentially control of the Red October. But
boy!
But none of that happens until the very end of the film. So are you oh boying because you disagree about that aspect of the novel? I'm talking just about the novel in that particular. I just said.
Yeah, the novel goes on and on after the film's story ends in a lot of ways.
The saboteur and the sub battle are combined in the film. I was just talking about the novel.
Yeah, I agree with that. Oh boy, Dan, I think it's time for us to bring our USS Hero's Journey to the surface for a beverage break. Take us to periscope depth.
Periscope depth, aye.
Activate the V8, the VLF. Time for a beverage break.
It's saying words.
I don't feel that I've gotten an adequate amount of Sean Connery in this episode. I wonder if the listeners agree.
See if David Kalikas will write to you and express his displeasure with the limited amount of Connery you've done.
I feel like I should do a voicemail greeting for David Kalikas as Sean Connery. This is David. I can't come to the phone. This is David's voicemail. Anyway.
All right, Jeff.
Oh, man.
Beverage break.
Yeah.
Here at the Vogler Lounge, this is one of those segments that becomes critical for our mental health when we have episodes as difficult as this one.
Oh.
Themed-wise, there's a couple of beverages mentioned in The Hunt for Red October. I'm curious where you went with your beverage selection.
Well, I did some research and I thought a lot about it, and the patron saint drink of Russia, of course, is vodka. And so I looked up vodka and how it is consumed and what are the rituals.
Oh, rituals.
Vodka is drunk straight in shots, not sipped, not mixed, straight. And it's only drunk for a special occasion. You don't just have a drink. There's an occasion. Yeah. Now, that occasion probably often is manufactured so that you can drink. But here's the kicker, and here's what convinced me to do this, because I thought it would be entertaining for the listeners.
Okay.
Traditionally, vodka is drunk and accompanied by snacks. And the traditional snacks are pickled vegetables.
You love pickles.
Not only do I hate pickles, but I am repulsed by the smell of vinegar.
We know this about you.
In an effort to create humor and engagement and tradition, I have here a slice of pickled cucumber. It is under a plastic dome so that the smell does not offend me until right before I nosh it. And then I have a generous shot of ice cold Smirnoff vodka.
That is generous. Nor is that a shot glass in
No,
your
it's drunk in
hand.
small tumblers.
Oh, I thought you said it was
This is the closest.
a shot. Okay.
Yeah, you
got
do
it.
a shot. So this is the closest. So I am not going to do all 2 ounces of this in one shot. So I will take a partial, like maybe half of this. Well, I'm going to eat a pickle, and I don't want to vomit all over the keyboard.
So by putting the dome over the pickle, what you have done is created a sensory cloud bomb that is going to burst in your face as soon as you lift that
Dan, you're not helping.
thing, rather than leaving it off and letting yourself slowly acclimate to the scent of that vinegar.
Right now, I feel like Jack Ryan on that helicopter.
The next time you decide to eat a pickle, just put it in a memo.
Maybe the only witness here is Dan, so I could have chosen to just eat like a potato chip or a slice of carrot.
Yeah, and when you held up the plate for the camera for me, it was completely washed out in white.
Oh,
I couldn't
well,
see what was on the plate. So
Here.
you really could have.
Can you see?
Okay,
Can you tell that?
I
All
do.
right.
I do see a pickle.
Here we
There's
go.
a pickle slice.
Here we go. I'm going to do pickle first so I can burn the flavor out of my mouth with
Yes.
with the vodka. Okay, here we go. I'm just going to put the whole pickle in my mouth. Oh,
Yep.
God, I don't
Yep.
want to do
It's
this.
fine. Pickles are delicious, Jeffrey. They're delicious. Oh, so good. So good. You're
God.
loving it. You are loving it.
Oh, God.
That's the best pickle you've ever had.
Oh.
I can tell. I can tell by the look on your face.
Oh, my God.
All right, vodka.
It's
Get it
crunching
down.
like a
Chaser.
like an insect. It's like a
Come on.
it's like a carapace filled with slimy acid.
You would not make it on a submarine.
Okay.
Vodka.
Zuzdarovia.
Oh, nice. Ooh, well done.
Ah.
You did it. You disconnected your safety harness and plunged into the frigid waters of pickle juice.
I need a strong Russian cigarette like they smoke in the novel. All right, Dan, what do you got?
I was going to go straight vodka as well. In the novel, Stolichnaya is mentioned by name. So I did buy a bottle of that. Then my wife suggested a Moscow Mule. So I do have a Moscow Mule here, which is just vodka, lime juice, and ginger beer. Normally you serve it in a copper mug, and my bar book says a Collins glass is an acceptable alternative. So that's what I have here.
Lovely.
Dosvay Drinkskevich. What did you say?
Zuzdarovia.
Zuzdarovia. Russian's a cool sounding language, isn't it?
It's so cool.
That's really tasty. I've never had a Moscow Mule before.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's just never, it's really never appealed to me.
It's kind of like a margarita, but not tequila.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is like it's a Russian margarita, sort of. And I'm really glad that the wife suggested a Moscow Mule, because this actually is tasty. It's got the lime in it. I can taste the ginger beer. It's zesty. It's really nice.
Well, with the bitter taste of conflict and pickle in my mouth, I'm going to finish my vodka and take us into Act 3.
Act 3 begins with the road back, or Joseph Campbell calls a segment of the road back. The road back is, as we've said before, a conflation of several segments of Campbell's hero's journey, and it is applicable a lot more often as the road back in terms of modern filmmaking. However, in this film, I thought the magic flight was more appropriate for this film. Because we are so out of sync, I feel like you should catch us up.
Yeah.
Because I'm way ahead of you. So
Agreed.
You catch us up, and then I will explain why I call the scene I was about to describe as road back / magic flight.
Got it. Okay. So, Hero is pursued by vengeful forces disturbed when he sees the object of his quest. One of the elements Vogler talks about is reversal of fortune. So, as you mentioned, Jack finally gets aboard the Dallas, and then comes the reversal of fortune when the Russian ambassador tells Pelt that Ramius's letter has announced his intention to fire his missiles at the U.S. So now what little support Jack had has been blown out of the water, and he is facing the entire power of the U.S. Navy has become a vengeful force, bearing down on the Red October. You mentioned he persuades Mancuso. So even though the rest of the Navy is bearing down, he has this string of hope, and he convinces Mancuso, goes to periscope depth, and communicates with the Red October, and they agree on a meeting place. The Laurentian Abyssal, the Dino de Laurentiis. But on the Red October, there's a reactor crisis. The radiation alarms are going off. Only it's a fake crisis, and it's just an excuse to get the men off the sub. But this is now we're pulling all the stops you can't unpull. We are trying to escape from the submarine now. So they surface, and a U.S. frigate approaches, and Ramius tells Tim Curry, who, such a good performance, that he and the officers, that the men should get off the ship. He and the officers are going to submerge and scuttle the ship. And Tim Curry, in this great line, he's such a credulous guy. He's such a party advocate. He wants to be a good guy. He says, "Oh, you'll receive the Order of Lenin for this, Captain." And you feel bad, like, oh man, of all the guys that are getting lied to, this poor doctor is just getting the shaft. But then another force of vengeance, a U.S. chopper takes off from the frigate and drops a torpedo into the water.
Range to target, 900 yards. 800 yards.
And we think, oh God, it's about to hit the Red October.
400 yards.
And then a hand reaches over
300 yards.
and detonates the torpedo when it's still 300 yards away from the target.
Torpedo is detonated.
Pan up to James Earl Jones.
No. You understand, Commander? That torpedo did not self-destruct. You heard it hit the hull, and I was never here.
He has altered the deal, and pray he hasn't altered it any further.
We are actually in sync again. This is my road back, and this is the magic flight. Because in terms of the magic flight, as Campbell describes in The Hero with 1,000 Faces, if the hero had permission to seize the object of his quest, his flight is assisted
Yes,
by
good call, Dan.
divine forces. And
Citing
this
the text. Excellent.
remote detonation of the torpedo by Greer, and then the frigate rescuing the crew of the Red October out of their rafts. This is all assisted flight.
I love it.
I'm so glad we're back in sync.
Really great citing of the text. I love it when you and when I are able to really tie in some specific quote from Campbell or Vogler is so satisfying, and it validates the power of the hero's journey when you can see something so specifically expressed, right? Those moments I love. So thank you for providing that. I'm going to actually take a moment to have a drink to you, Dan, for recognizing that. Zozdorovia. Okay. My final bullet point for the road back is the Red October dives, and Ryan, Mancuso, and Jonesy take a rescue submersible, the one that was introduced in that scene, that first scene with Skip Tyler, which I didn't put that together until the second time I watched the film. And I was like, oh, duh, that's the submersible. It's a great plant, because otherwise it's Deus Ex Machina.
Correct. And in the novel, it is handled so completely differently.
Yes.
There are scenes. There's a completely different. There's like a third. I don't even know how many, but a Russian submarine has a reactor accident and explodes underwater and sinks, and the DSRV is deployed to explore it. And then, so you're getting all this information about what the DSRV does and how big it is and the crew. And again, in terms of the novel, it's great because it just builds the enormity of this situation and the gravity.
So the last bullet point for the road back. So they take the rescue submersible called the Mystic, which is interesting because Campbell talks about mystics ferrying the hero across rivers, back from the world of the dead into the world of the living.
Yeah.
To meet up with the Red October. And on the way, Mancuso arms Jack with Chekhov's gun. Even though they're not anywhere near the Enterprise anymore.
Chekhov's nuclear whistles.
All right. Do you have anything to add to Road Back, or are we back on the block?
That was literally my final bullet point.
Oh, thank heavens. Which brings us to Resurrection. The hero faces death one more time in a final battle or showdown. This time, the danger is on the broadest scale of the entire story. Holy cow. If this wasn't enough tension for you, if thermonuclear war wasn't a big deal, we've got three forces clashing in a final battle. We've got Ramius and the Red October. We've got Tupolev and his sub, and the Saboteur. So Ryan, Mancuso, and Jonesy board the Red October. Now, the officers of the October and the officers of the Dallas are facing off on the bridge. And to break the ice, Ryan bums a Russian cigarette and chokes on it. And it does break the ice because now the officers are laughing at Ryan. He really did a good job of humanizing himself.
And in the novel, Ryan is a smoker, but he's been trying to quit. In the film, he keeps saying he doesn't smoke. He's offered cigarettes multiple times, and he says, "No, I don't smoke. No, I don't smoke." That's what makes this moment in the film important, because he is, again, stepping outside his comfort level, but trying to connect as a human, man to man, with these Russians by asking
Jack
for a
Ryan
cigarette.
is lawful good. And I thought it was great that in the movie, he's a non-smoker. He's kind of a goody two-shoes. And it makes this moment, like you said, more symbolic. So Ramius presents the sub to Mancuso and requests asylum on behalf of his men. And then, after the hands are shaken...
Torpedo! The Americans are shooting at us again!
Pitch is too high. The torpedo's Russian.
What do you mean another torpedo? Where the hell did it come from?
Con sonar, new contact, Sierra 4-1, Alpha class Soviet submarine.
They hear another torpedo. Holy crap. Remember Tupolev? He's found Red October too, and he is ready to blow it out of the water. It's a personal vendetta. Somehow he's ready to kill Ramius. He wants to be the guy. He wants to be the guy who gets Ramius. And then, for some reason, just as in the novel, Ramius puts Ryan at the helm. He gives him there's literally another sub-captain on the boat, but they give Ryan the helm. The poor son of a bitch, now he's got two captains yelling at him.
Well, hang on. In the novel, Ramius has already been shot.
That's not how it is in the movie, though. And so I love it that they put Jack in the hot seat, but this was the one thing where I'm like, really? In any case, Ramius turns the ship and heads straight into the torpedo full speed. And Mancuso is pooping his pants, saying, Ryan, don't do that. Don't follow that order. And of course, Ramius is a genius because he gets there before the torpedo can arm itself, and it just slams into the hole and breaks up unexploded. Meanwhile, Tupolev is turning off all the safeties on all of his torpedoes, getting ready to take another shot, just as gunfire erupts on the Red October in the conning tower. Vasily takes the bullet, and he dies in Ramius's arms. It's such a touching scene for Sam Neill as he says, "I would have liked to have seen Montana." And, of course, the shot was fired by the saboteur. And now he's making his way to the firing room torpedo chamber deck venue to blow up the ship. Ryan, I don't know the names of these places, so I'm just covering my bases.
Yeah, no, I like venue. We're calling it venue.
Trunk distribution venue.
Yes.
Ryan and Ramius get guns and head back there.
Ramius's gun, I would add, is provided by Mancuso. Mancuso
That's right.
hands him his personal handgun.
Yes, that is a great moment of trust.
And Mancuso is given command of the Red October while Ramius hunts down the saboteur.
Yes, that's a really good, important moment that I skipped.
The sabotagnik.
So the sabotagnik is waiting for them and fires, hits Ramius in the chest. And of course, this is the moment where the hero is stripped of his allies again, and now he has to go alone. But we get this line from Sean Connery, and he says,
"Famous.
Be careful, Ryan.
Most
things in here.
No,
you just wait. You
have to do it.
You wait. Nope. You wait. Make him wake.
No,
I
am joining David Kalikas in being outraged that you're not doing this in his.
Can I finish?
Go.
Can I finish
Just go.
this bullet point, please?
Just go.
So, after a warning from Ramius to be careful, Jack goes after the saboteur alone. Dan, now he's on the hunt in the Red October. And now we get Alec Baldwin's amazing impression of Sean Connery, which means you get my mediocre impression of Alec Baldwin's impression of Sean Connery saying, "Some things in here don't react well to bullets." Only Sean says most things in here, and Alec says some things. Alec Baldwin. But it's a great impression. You love it.
Ryan, some things in here don't react well to bullets.
Yeah, I wonder, did that happen on set? That couldn't have been written into the script.
What a ballsy move for Alec in his first major movie to be like, I'm going to mock Sean Mother Connery. Okay, so now we're cutting back between Tupolev bearing down on them, Mancuso helming the Red October, trying to evade Tupolev. Jack is trying to get to the saboteur. Tupolev launches an armed torpedo, and we think it's over. Red October is doomed. Only it's not! It's not! Because the Dallas, now under the command of Lieutenant Commander Thompson, swoops in, and the torpedo follows her instead.
It is such an amazing cinematic moment when you're seeing the Red October sailing toward camera. Behind it, you're watching the torpedo bearing down, and then from camera right, you start hearing this other sonar sound. So it's like two conflicting sonar noises.
Yeah.
And then this gigantic black object slides into frame and then peels. Oh, so you're like, yeah.
It's Han Solo coming in to aid
For real.
Luke Skywalker.
That's it. It is that moment, absolutely.
And so the torpedo follows her instead. They launch countermeasures, and the torpedo veers off course. Ryan finds the assassin. It's the cook with the wires in the torpedo room. Where's Tim Curry? After a brief standoff, the cook's assistant starts to connect the two wires, which is the international symbol for blowing up a bomb. But Jack aims his pistol and unloads on him, firing exactly 7 times, the same number of bullets
again.
You may remember from the... No? No?
Brad Pitt and 7,
Now, like Stellan Skarsgård, everyone is sweaty. There is just The makeup artists are spraying silicone spray on everybody. Ryan and Ramius make it back to the con just as Tupolev's torpedo is closing in, but Mancuso got some moves too.
Yeah.
He has driven the Red October on a near collision course with Tupolev's sub, and the torpedo picks him off instead.
Yeah.
Kaboom!
I would add that this is the second film in a row that we have covered that is resolved with a game of chicken.
Ooh, helicopter jumping, game of chicken. I mean, it's weird. There's a chapter in The Hero with a Thousand Faces where the hero must board a helicopter and leap from it.
Yeah, and that helicopter is piloted by a chicken.
That's the end of Resurrection.
It is important to add that we have not mentioned this, but the entire crew of the Red October, having been rescued and is standing on the deck of the U.S. Navy frigate, is watching all of this happen. And as they see the ocean burst up with the explosion of a submarine, they think it's the Red October because they have just watched the Dallas breach the surface.
Right.
And elsewhere, something else explodes. They don't know that Tupolev and the Konovalov have joined the fray.
Yeah.
So they all believe that the Red October has been destroyed, which is part of the entire cover story of this entire scenario.
In the novel, it's more convoluted. The Americans take an old American submarine that's being decommissioned and take it out and destroy it to fool everyone into thinking a sub's exploded. So this was man.
And then take a DSRV, allow a Russian officer to sit inside that DSRV. They take it down to the wreckage of that submarine.
Yeah.
Which has, among that wreckage, has been placed the depth gauge that was taken off of the Red October and left there in the wreckage of the Ethan Allen so that the Russian officer can see it and reclaim it and look at the serial number and cross-reference it and they go, oh yeah, this is the depth gauge from the Red October. It's like so much...
overwhelming.
I was like, how am I going to write this analysis and not have it be 45 pages long?
Well, congratulations, it is.
All right. The final segment. We've reached the finish line, Jeffrey. Freedom to live or return with the elixir. The hero, having won some precious treasure or Russian nuclear submarine, now returns to the ordinary world to share the spoils of battle. As the Red October is escorted into a river in the northeastern United States, Ryan and Ramius stand at the top of the conning tower, watching the peaceful scenery go by. They kind of share a personal moment. Ramius delivers a fake Christopher Columbus quote.
Yes.
And the sea will grant each man new hope.
As sleep brings dreams of home. I'll just cut in the clip because that was horrendous.
No, you owe David Kalikas your Sean Connery impression. David Kalikas, we will not cut that. That is staying
Ryan
in.
Answers, welcome to the new world, sir. Everybody's mission has been accomplished. Ryan has succeeded in convincing everybody that Ramius wanted to defect. Ramius has saved his entire crew, except for poor Borodin. Managed to get them off the ship, and they're all headed back to the Soviet Union safely. The novel has a whole extra 30 pages of the crew being treated to the pleasures of freedom and American life, and
being indoctrinated.
That's exactly it. They're being flown over suburban neighborhoods, and the flight crew is saying, if you look out your left window, you'll see some suburban homes that are all owned by members of the working class.
Who all own cars. And
they all own a car. And this is all a callback to earlier information that was provided where various Russian characters mention how they have been awarded a 6-room apartment and they have their own car. Like these are granted to them by the state. Everybody else, nobody else drives. If you drive in the Soviet Union, you are a somebody.
Yeah.
But here in the United States, everybody's got at least one car, usually more. So I thought that was an interesting part of the novel.
Yeah.
But our last scene of the film is we're on a passenger plane. Jack Ryan has finally managed to fall asleep on an airplane.
What a character arc.
And the camera pans over, and the seat next to him is the teddy bear from Die Hard.
Yeah. Not a ski Barbie from the book, which is what the little girl wanted.
Not to be confused with a surfing Barbie that James Greer is apparently obsessed with. It's
different
the
sport
skiing. It's the skiing Barbie
You'd
that
think
little
that
Sally wants.
Anything to do with water, he would understand, right? He's an admiral. I have two other just tiny points. So in that scene where they're on the Red October driving up the Penobscot, that scene is the worst day for night cinematography I've seen. It's so bad that it nearly eclipses the love scene from 1995's Braveheart, which also stars Sean Connery.
What?
Scottish Sean, he wasn't in that? Anyway.
Okay, you just caused my brain to split in half for a second. I'm like, wait, what? Sean Connery?
Oh, that's Highlander, right? I'm sorry.
Oh. I am being killed by you right now.
And then one other amazing performance moment, and I wonder if it was directed by John McTiernan or if it was a choice from Richard Jordan. So part of the return with the elixir is taking your victory and sharing the spoils of battle, right? So the effect on the rest of the world is important. And it's represented in the scene where Pelt gets to tell the Russian ambassador that they managed to save the crew, but the Red October got blown up, and maybe they'll be able to, maybe in a couple months they'll have some scraps to hand over. And the ultimate power play, Richard Jordan reaches across his desk and takes candy from his own candy bowl. And it's like the I drink your milkshake. I'm going to take the candy intended for you and eat it in your face. It's such a great moment. I love Richard Jordan. I want to do a Richard Jordan film festival.
That was a great moment. And a good comedic end to the film too, when Ambassador Lysenko says, "Well, there is another matter we've had, and he's talking about Tupolev's ship.
Right.
He said, we had another ambassador. You've lost another submarine."
And the ambassador literally has a hat in his hand.
Yes.
He literally has his fedora,
Yes.
his 30 years out of date fedora in his hand. So great.
Oh gosh, Jeff, I am exhausted. I think it's time to bring this ship into port.
Ship to port.
We would like to thank our patrons.
Thank the patrons.
Particularly our demigod patrons. Both Boys React, Gabriel Gale, Jeff Scott, John Peterson Jr., Joseph Wilbur, Michelle Calderon, Ricky Garvin, Scott Sanford, Ami Garvin, and Chris Bodeker. And I would like to extend a special shout out to our newest Patreon patron joining us this month, Ethan Jones. Ethan, thank you so much for your support. We really appreciate it. If you're interested in supporting the Hero's Journey podcast, please visit patreon.com/Heroes Journey Podcast. We are grateful for any contribution. That you're not going to scream contribution I?
No, Dan, that would be ridiculous. We'd also like to thank Dean Ethington for designing the Hero's Journey Podcast logo. Thank you, Taylor Jordan, for composing and performing the Hero's Journey theme music. And thanks to Jason Dorff for our awesome episode artwork.
And if you've not yet subscribed to The Hero's Journey on your favorite podcast app, please consider doing so. Rate the show on Apple Podcasts.
Rate the show,
and tell your friends about us.
If you are on Twitter, drop us a message. Drop us a DM at us at Heroes Podcast and tell us how you found our show. We're always curious to know who's finding our show and how.
The novel The Hunt for Red October by Tom Clancy is copyright 1984 Jack Ryan Enterprises Limited. The motion picture is copyright 1990 Paramount Pictures Corporation.
Thanks again for listening. Until next time,
journey on.